Mr Jericho, did you have an opening statement that you'd like to give?
Yes, thank you. I'd like to thank the committee for the opportunity to appear today. My evidence relates only to the proposed amendments to the Petroleum Resources Rent Tax Assessment Act 1987, Schedule 5, part of the bill. This proposed legislation seeks to limit the proportion of petroleum resource rent tax assessable income that can be offset to a maximum deduction of 90%. These changes were estimated at last year's budget to increase the revenue of the PRRT over the forward estimates by $2.4 billion. While on the surface this is to be welcomed, we at the Australian Institute argue that the amendments do actually not go far enough to ensure that the gas industry pays a fair share of the tax, given the large profits it is generating through international events such as the illegal Russian invasion of Ukraine and the ongoing impact its product has on climate change. The $2.4 billion also needs to be considered in the context of overall oil and gas production. According to the ATO, over the past 5 years, assessable oil and gas revenue has averaged $34 billion per year, while PRRT revenue of just $1.2 billion per year, representing 3.6% of petroleum revenue. Rather than adequately tax economic rents derived from the petroleum and the oil and gas industry, the PRRT has actually become a gas company accountant's paradise. The inadequacy, in our view, of the 90% cap is made clear by the reality that it took less than a year for the estimates of an extra the estimates of an extra $2.4 billion in PRRT revenue to be wiped away. In the December 23-24 MYEFO, Treasury revised down the PRRT revenue over the forward estimates by that same $2.4 billion, just 7 months after the Treasurer was boasting of that being added to revenue. This is despite the MYEFO admitting that it is estimating higher oil prices than was the case in the May budget. So poorly does the PRRT work to provide revenue that can be used to fund necessary services that in the 2023-24 budget, Treasury estimated that revenue for beer excise, visa application fees, spirits excise, HECS and HELP student debt repayments and tobacco excise would all be higher than the revenue from the PRRT. We're often told that our economy is based on mining and gas company production, but it couldn't be more accurately said that it rides more on the backs of beer and spirits drinkers, Australians travelling overseas, smokers and university students. The PRRT was originally designed mostly to cover oil extraction, whereas the LNG sector involves much greater complexity, most notably the price point at which the PRRT is calculated. The PRRT, unfortunately, due to a decision in 2019, excludes onshore LNG production from its remit and thus also misses out on taxing the rents of a significant section of the gas industry. The argument that these onshore operations pay royalties and thus Australians receive a just return is revealed to be false by a simple look at the figures provided by the gas companies themselves. According to the gas industry's own figures, the level of total taxes and fees, which include royalties, relative to revenue and production in 2020-21, which are the most recent figures, were lower than they had ever been the case in the previous 30 years. Polling by the Australian Institute reveals that the current situation does not meet with current community standards. Our polling found that 6 in 10 Australians support capping how much expenses companies can deduct from the PRRT they pay, but crucially, 41% prefer a stricter cap on the amount gas companies can deduct from the PRRT than what is currently being proposed, and just 17% believe that a 90% cap is adequate. While the Australian Institute recommends a stricter cap of 80% or 60%, this will unfortunately still allow gas companies to avoid paying a just tax on windfall profits such as occurred during the Russian invasion of Ukraine. We actually believe that the PRRT needs a full reform to enable it to become a true windfall or excess profits tax. And finally, we believe that the aims of the PRRT have for too long massively erred on the downside to avoid the risk of discouraging new investment. Any discussion of changes to the PRRT must, we argue, include reference that gas is a fossil fuel and contributes directly to climate change. That is and will have extreme costs to the economy and our society in the years ahead. Given the science of climate change, the idea that a reformed PRRT might discourage exploration and development that wouldn't actually be pumping gas for decades to come should actually be viewed, we think, as a benefit, not a cost. I again thank the committee for the opportunity to provide evidence today, and am happy to answer questions.
Thank you very much. Mr. Jericho, I just wanted to, and I understand that you think broader reform is needed, significant broader reform is needed, and also that this Schedule 5 of this bill should itself go further. I just wanted to clarify your evidence. You went to the revenue that's projected to come from this measure. And just working through that, we know that PRRT is a project-based tax, and it covers existing projects off the northwest coast, Fluton, Gorgon, etc. None of them are actually paying any PRRT today. That's your understanding as well, is it?
Yes, I mean, our research has shown certainly up to the most recent figures, if you go from, say, 2013-14 to 2021-22, if you look at Exxon, Shell, Impex, Chevron, none of them have paid PRRT over that time. It's and this is despite combined revenue of the order of $296.9 billion, which to me suggests the fact that they're not paying PRRT suggests either they're extremely unprofitable, which we know is not the case, or we've got a economic rent tax that in effect enables these companies to avoid recording any economic rents in the taxable sense. And I think that really doesn't pass the smell test. And I think one of the problems as well with the 90% cap and the proposed changes is that even had it been in place, it's very unlikely it would have actually captured any of the excess or windfall profits that came about due to the Russian invasion of Ukraine that sent gas prices doubling. And so it's our view that, one of the ways to actually look at whether a tax is working is if you were to apply these changes to the past, would have it actually met the goals that the changes are apparently attempting to reach, and we don't think that they actually would.
I just wanted to check because understand that you would like much bigger reform, but do you accept that projects that are covered by PRRT are currently not paying, as we've just discussed, and this measure will mean that they actually do pay? It will bring forward payments of PRRT. That there will actually be revenue raised by the measure.
Well, I think the difficulty with that is, and you almost need to go to some of the speeches made by the Treasurer, it's always that, yes, there will be more revenue, but it is more revenue sooner. And so it's a case of it very much appears that, yes, there is revenue that would not be paid in the next 4 years or over the forward estimates that is going to be paid. However, there's no suggestion that actually the total quantum over the life cycle of these projects is going to be increased. It seems always the case that it is about more revenue sooner rather than just more revenue. And I think that's one of the crucial issues about these changes is, yes, it might bring forward more revenue. I would also argue that the fact that that $2.4 billion, that certainly the changes are still going to have an impact, even though the MyEFO estimates have revised it down by $2.4 billion. The fact that the quantum is now...
The MyEFO You're right, I think. I just wanted to clarify this evidence because you're right about the $2.4 billion being the original budget estimate. MyEFO has revised it down, but not by the full amount.
Well, it's 2.4 billion. It was 2.4 billion over the forward estimates. That was the increase over in the May budget, and there's $2.4 billion decrease. Now, I'm not saying that that is due to the 90% cut or actually the interaction. What I'm suggesting is that because of parameter changes, despite the fact that the MyEFO is actually forecasting higher oil prices, in a sense, in quantum over the forward estimates, we're getting no actual benefit. I would argue if it was an actual an amendment, a change to the PRRT that was going to deliver the aims that have been set out by the government, it shouldn't be able to be, in a sense, wiped away, or the extra revenue shouldn't be wiped away by parameter changes, especially when it's still increasing oil prices. So I think that's kind of my point, is that if you're forecasting that this is going to generate better returns, bigger returns, even if it is just bigger returns sooner, it shouldn't be so minor that they're able to, in a sense, be wiped away by some parameter changes.
We'll check that evidence with Treasury later, in the sense that MyEFO has a downward revision for 23-24, reflecting a weaker outlook. But there's an expectation, as I understand it, that the PRRT will provide revenue that was not there before from those existing projects that are not paying it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I'm not saying that the MyEFO changes are reversing the impact of the 90%. I'm just saying that because of these parameter changes in the total quantum, because of the actual operation of the PRRT, and I think this probably goes to the weakness of the PRRT itself, even before we get to any proposed amendments, is that if you do attempt to do changes, it is so subject to parameter changes that any sort of attempts to produce more revenue kind of get wiped out. And I think that's something that points to a broader concern that I think the government and Parliament really needs to be looking at.
Okay. I just want to sort of put on the record, I'll check with Treasury later, but I think you're saying that there's no revenue and you're referring to modelling, but the budget says there is. MyEFO revises it down, as you've said. I think, as I understand it, we're agreed that there will be revenue coming forward.
Yes, there will be more revenue due, more revenue. I would put it, there will be more revenue sooner. I'm less convinced, and I certainly haven't seen any statements that there will be more revenue in total over the life cycle of these projects from these changes. But my point about the MyEFO is that if you.
Oh, that's okay. I think so. And sorry, just because of the time issues we've had, I'll go to Senator McKim if we've got you. Senator McKim.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes.
We can. Yes.
Thank you, and apologies to the committee and to Mr Jericho for my technical issues earlier. Mr Jericho, just a quick touch base on the matter you were just discussing with the Chair. The facts, as I understand them, I'll just put these to you and ask for a response. But in last year's budget in May, the PRRT receipts were written down by $1.3 billion over the estimates. Then in the December MyEFO, PRRT receipts were written down again by a further $2.4 billion. Is that your understanding?
Yes. I'm not clear about the first part, but certainly the second was the write-down of 2.4, yes.
All right, thank you. So I can assure you the $1.3 billion is accurate. That was the original write-down in last year's May budget. If you take that on face value, I just want to net this all out so we understand, so folks understand what we're talking about here. If the proposal in the legislation that we're currently discussing were to pass, and that would raise $2.4 billion over the estimates. The total revenue that the ATO will be collecting from oil and gas companies after the passage of that legislation, if it does pass, will actually be less than what the ATO collected last year.
Yes,
is that right?
Yes, you only need to look at the budget papers, and the estimates over the years covered by the 22-23 October budget for PRRT are actually now greater than are estimated to occur in the most recent MyEFO. So, and that is the October budget was before any proposed changes to the PRRT, and so even after these changes to PRRT, the budget is now expected to actually raise less.
Yeah, thank you. So even should these much vaunted changes be accepted by the Parliament, we're at best treading water in terms of revenue and at worst going backwards.
Yes, that's certainly our view, is that we're not denying that these changes are increasing revenue over what there would have been had they not been put in place, but they are so little that, as you put it, the estimates for PRRT revenue were greater back in October 2022 than they are currently.
Thank you. If you look at a lot of things that the Treasurer and Treasury have said around these gas changes, they're repeatedly suggesting that they wanted to design the changes so as to not deter investment. I'll just ask you to put aside, for the purposes of this question and answer, the fact that we're talking here about a planet-cooking product that is rendering Earth uninhabitable for human life as we speak. If we just put that aside for a minute, the whole point of a super profits tax is that it doesn't deter investment, isn't it?
Yes, notionally that is the whole point of a super profit tax, because the profits being taxed are not expected. They are not the profits that are required for an ongoing profitable company or operation. They are not profits that are expected by investors. And so, for example, I know former Secretary Ken Henry, when was talking of the windfall profits that occurred in the gas company due to the Russian invasion of Ukraine, said, well, actually, we could tax them at 100% because they did not affect the investment decisions of those gas companies in any way. Now, we're not suggesting that, but you're quite right. Super profits, or these windfall excess profits, economic rents, are not counted on in terms of investment decisions. They are over and above what is expected for an ongoing, normally profitable company.
Last question.
Thank you, that's helpful. Okay, thanks. Well, just to tie that up in that case, therefore, I'm not sure if you're aware, Mr Jericho, but Treasury did put forward, either 2 or 3 options, depending on what view you take, but they were all able to be described as a super profits tax. Therefore, based on your previous answer, would you agree that none of those options that were considered would have actually deterred investment?
No, I don't believe so. I mean, that is the operation of a super profits tax, is that it is taxing things that are not expected and not required for ongoing investment. And so it really is a case of looking at a commodity that is able to be, that is non-renewable. We, in a sense, only have one shot at getting returns to the community on this. And in our belief, an appropriate and true windfall profits or super profits tax would not affect investment, but actually would enable an honest or a just return to the Australian community. And also, given, and I know we have set it to one side, the fact that gas is a greenhouse gas, it also would enable those companies that are contributing to climate change to assist in the funding of the transition away from fossil fuel-based economy.
Thanks, Mr Jericho. That's very helpful.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jericho. Thanks for bearing with us through our technical issues. We appreciate you appearing as a witness today, and you go with our thanks. Thank you.
Thanks for watching. Visit australiainstitute.org.au for all our latest research, commentary and analysis, as well as details for upcoming events and webinars.